Seinfeld made nothing feel like everything. Coffee shop arguments, awkward dates, bad manners, and tiny problems that somehow became unforgettable. But far beyond Jerry's apartment and Monk's cafe, the cast's real lives took turns no punchline could fix. Some stayed comedy legends, some quietly left the spotlight, and some deaths shocked fans who never expected to say goodbye so soon. Here's what happened to the cast of Seinfeld then and now. Jerry Seinfeld played Jerry Seinfeld in Seinfeld at 35 years old, becoming the calm center of a sitcom built around everyday irritation, awkward conversations, and tiny social rules. As the fictional version of himself, Jerry was the observer, the sarcastic commentator, and the friend who somehow stayed relaxed while everyone around him spiraled. What made Jerry stand out was his dry humor and emotional distance. He rarely exploded like George or burst into chaos like Kramer, but his reactions made the madness funnier. His apartment became the show's gathering place, where bad dates, strange neighbors, and ridiculous complaints turned into comedy. Outside the show, Jerry Seinfeld was already a rising stand-up comedian, but Seinfeld turned him into one of the most successful names in television history. After the series, he continued with stand-up, specials, books, films, and the hit interview series Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Now 72, Jerry Seinfeld remains active in comedy and entertainment. He still tours, gives interviews, and continues to be closely linked to the legacy of the sitcom that changed American television comedy. Jerry's legacy is built on making nothing feel funny. Through him, Seinfeld turned ordinary annoyances into cultural memory, proving that a look, a pause, or one perfectly timed complaint could keep audiences laughing for decades. Michael Richards played Cosmo Kramer in Seinfeld at 39 years old, creating one of television's most unpredictable neighbors. Kramer was the wild physical force of the show, crashing through Jerry's door with strange plans, big reactions, and a rhythm that made every entrance feel like an event. Kramer stood out because he lived by his own logic. He was bizarre, confident, and strangely charming, the kind of character who could turn a simple errand into complete confusion. Michael Richards gave him explosive movement, elastic facial expressions, and a physical comedy style that felt almost old school but completely fresh. Away from Seinfeld, Richards had worked in sketch comedy and television before becoming a household name. His performance as Kramer won major recognition, including 3 Emmy Awards, and made him one of the most memorable comic actors of the 1990s. Today, Michael Richards is 77 and lives a much quieter public life than during the height of his fame. After years away from the spotlight, he returned to public attention through interviews, reflection, and his 2024 memoir. Kramer remains unforgettable because he brought chaos without needing much explanation. Michael Richards turned a neighbor in a hallway into a comedy legend, giving Seinfeld a burst of strange energy that fans still recognize instantly. Jason Alexander became George Costanza, Jerry's anxious and unlucky best friend, at 29 years old, bringing insecurity, jealousy, bad luck, and terrible decisions into the center of the show's everyday world. George was unforgettable because a small problem could become a personal disaster in seconds. A job interview, a date, a lie, or even a parking space could send him into full panic, and Jason made every meltdown feel both ridiculous and familiar. Away from the sitcom, Jason came from a strong theater background and built a career across stage, film, television, voice acting, and directing. His work as George earned multiple Emmy nominations and helped define the nervous comic energy of the 1990s. Now 67, Jason Alexander remains active through acting, directing, voice work, interviews, and public appearances. He has stayed connected to the role while continuing to build a career far beyond one famous character. George Costanza endures because he made failure feel strangely relatable. Jason gave him the courage to be cowardly, the confidence to be wrong, and the kind of comic misery audiences still quote decades later. Wayne Knight became Newman, Jerry's mailman neighbor and strangely theatrical enemy, at 33 years old, turning a simple hallway rivalry into one of the show's most famous running tensions. Newman stood out because he treated every tiny conflict like a grand personal mission. He was petty, dramatic, smug, and oddly powerful in his own little universe, especially whenever Jerry greeted him with icy disgust. Outside the show, Wayne Knight became one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors. Audiences recognized him from Jurassic Park, Third Rock from the Sun, animation, comedy, drama, and countless roles where he made supporting characters impossible to ignore. Today, Wayne Knight is 71 and continues working across television, film, voice acting, and fan events. He has embraced the affection for Newman while still showing the range that kept him visible long after the sitcom ended. Newman remains a pop culture favorite because Wayne turned annoyance into an art form. He gave the character a villain's confidence inside a sitcom world, making Hello Newman unforgettable. Heidi Swedberg became Susan Ross, George Costanza's reasonable fiancée, at 23 years old, bringing calm, patience, and uncomfortable normality into one of television's strangest romantic storylines. Susan worked because she felt almost too normal for the world around her. She was sensible, composed, and patient, while George kept looking for ways to escape responsibility, making their engagement painfully funny. Away from the series, Heidi continued acting in television and film, appearing in projects such as ER, Murder, She Wrote, and Gilmore Girls. Later, she became closely connected to music, especially performing and teaching ukulele. Now 60, Heidi Swedberg has lived a quieter public life than many of her former castmates. She remains connected to fans through music, teaching, occasional appearances, and the lasting curiosity around Susan's unusual storyline. Susan Ross is remembered because her ending became one of the darkest jokes in sitcom history. Heidi played her with enough normality to make George's world look even more selfish, absurd, and uncomfortable. Estelle Harris became Estelle Costanza, George's loud, anxious, and endlessly frustrated mother, at 61 years old, bringing a storm of parental panic into the Costanza family. Shrill, explosive, and weirdly lovable, Estelle could turn one sentence into a full household crisis. Her shouting was not just noise, it was the sound of a mother who loved too hard, worried too much, and never let George escape guilt. Before becoming a sitcom favorite, Estelle started acting later in life after raising her children. She worked in commercials, television, and voice acting, later reaching new generations as the voice of Mrs. Potato Head in the Toy Story films. Estelle Harris passed away on April 2, 2022, at the age of 93. Her death was reported as natural causes by some outlets, while other reports said the specific cause was not publicly disclosed. Estelle Costanza remains unforgettable because she made family anxiety hilarious. Estelle Harris turned yelling, guilt, and motherly panic into pure comedy, leaving behind one of sitcom television's most recognizable moms. Jerry Stiller became Frank Costanza, George's furious and unpredictable father, at 62 years old, giving the Costanza home a comic pressure cooker no one could control. Short-tempered, proud, and always one insult away from combustion, Frank made every family scene feel dangerous in the funniest way. Whether he was shouting at George, fighting over old grudges, or inventing Festivus, he turned anger into performance art. Away from the role, Jerry Stiller had already built a long comedy career with his wife Ann Miera as the duo Stiller and Miera. Afterward, he reached another generation as Arthur Spooner on The King of Queens. Jerry Stiller passed away on May 11, 2020, at the age of 92 from natural causes, as confirmed publicly by his son Ben Stiller. His death brought tributes from fans who loved his wild timing and explosive delivery. Frank Costanza still feels like controlled chaos in human form. Jerry Stiller gave him rage, rhythm, and strange tenderness, creating a father figure who could make even a family argument legendary. Liz Sheridan became Helen Seinfeld, Jerry's loving and endlessly supportive mother, at 60 years old, giving the show one of its gentlest parental voices. Warm, proud, and hilariously convinced her son could do no wrong, Helen brought a softer kind of comedy to Jerry's world. She was not chaotic like the Costanzas, Her humor came from devotion, denial, and the classic motherly belief that Jerry was always special. Outside the sitcom, Liz Sheridan worked in theater, television, and film, and was also known for playing Mrs. Ochmanek on Alf. Earlier in life, she wrote about her relationship with James Dean in the memoir Dizzy and Jimmy. Liz Sheridan passed away on April 15, 2022, at the age of 93. Reports said she died in her sleep from natural causes, only days after fellow Seinfeld parent Estelle Harris had passed. Helen Seinfeld remains beloved because Liz Sheridan made her affection feel effortless. She gave Jerry's TV family warmth, sweetness, and a mother's blind loyalty that still makes fans smile. John O'Hurley became J. Peterman, Elaine's dramatic and wildly poetic boss, at 34 years old, turning a catalog company executive into one of the show's most strangely elegant recurring characters. Grand, theatrical, and completely committed to his own legend, Peterman made ordinary workplace scenes feel like excerpts from an adventure novel. Every sentence sounded overwritten in the funniest way, as if even buying socks required a heroic backstory. Away from the sitcom, John O'Hurley built a varied career in acting, hosting, voice work, and stage performance. He became known for Family Feud, Broadway work in Chicago, and later bought into The Real J. Peterman Company, blurring comedy with real business. Now 72, John O'Hurley remains active in entertainment, public appearances, theater, and brand-related work. His career has stayed polished, witty, and closely connected to the character that made his voice instantly recognizable. J. Peterman remains memorable because John made exaggeration sound sophisticated. He gave Elaine's workplace a bizarre kind of class, proving that a supporting character could become iconic simply by speaking like every day was an epic journey. Barney Martin became Morty Seinfeld, Jerry's proud and opinionated father, at 66 years old, giving Jerry's family life a dry, old-school warmth, shaped by Florida condos, money worries, and parental loyalty. Morty stood out because he was stubborn, practical, and always ready to defend his son. Whether arguing over a wallet, a jacket, or retirement community politics, he brought the humor of a father who believed he was usually right. Before becoming Morty, Barney Martin had a colorful path from New York police detective to actor. He worked on stage, television, and film, and was especially known for playing Amos Hart in the Broadway production of Chicago. Barney Martin passed away on March 21, 2005, at the age of 82 after battling cancer. His death marked the loss of a performer whose calm delivery and lived-in presence made even small domestic arguments feel funny and familiar. Morty Seinfeld remains beloved because Barney made him feel like someone's real dad. He gave Jerry's parents a grounded humor, balancing the show's absurd conversations with a recognizable kind of family stubbornness. Richard Hurd became Mr. Wilhelm, George Costanza's confused and often overwhelmed boss at the New York Yankees, at 56 years old, adding corporate absurdity to George's already unstable work life. Wilhelm was funny because he seemed official without ever being fully in control. He could deliver orders, misunderstand everything around him, and still act like the office had structure, making George's job at the Yankees feel even more ridiculous. Outside the show, Richard Hurd built a long career as a reliable character actor in film and television. He appeared in V, T.J. Hooker, Star Trek Voyager, and many other projects, often playing authority figures with a serious face and hidden comic potential. Richard Hurd passed away on May 26, 2020, at the age of 87 from complications related to colon cancer. Fans remembered him as one of those actors whose face seemed to appear everywhere across decades of American television. Wilhelm remains a perfect piece of George's workplace chaos. Richard Hurd gave him just enough dignity to make the confusion funnier, turning a mid-level Yankees executive into a quietly memorable sitcom presence. Richard Fancy became Mr. Lipman, Elaine's polished but often ridiculous publishing boss, at 45 years old, adding another layer of workplace awkwardness to the show's New York world. Lipman was funny because he looked like the kind of executive who should have everything under control, but his office life was just as strange as everyone else's. Around Elaine, he became part boss, part obstacle, and part accidental comic problem. Away from the sitcom, Richard Fancy built a steady career as a character actor across television, film, and commercials. He appeared in shows such as The District, The Wonder Years, General Hospital, and many guest roles where his formal presence often made the comedy sharper. Now 83, Richard Fancy has kept a lower public profile than many of the main cast members. Even so, his long screen career remains familiar to viewers who recognize him from decades of supporting roles on American television. Lippman remains memorable because Richard played him with just enough seriousness to make the absurdity land. He gave Elaine's work life a dry, uncomfortable rhythm that fit perfectly with the show's everyday chaos. Patrick Warburton became David Puddy, Elaine's deadpan mechanic and on-again, off-again boyfriend, at 24 years old, giving the show one of its most famously flat comic voices. Puddy worked because he seemed almost impossible to disturb. Whether he was staring blankly, saying too little, or treating absurd situations like they were completely normal, his stillness became the joke, especially next to Elaine's sharper energy. Beyond the role, Patrick Warburton built a major career in television, film, and voice acting. He became known for The Tick, Rules of Engagement, Family Guy, The Emperor's New Groove, and many animated roles that used his deep voice as a comic weapon. Today, Patrick Warburton is 62 and remains active across voice work, television, films, conventions, and interviews. His public image is still tied to that unmistakable voice, but his career has grown far beyond one sitcom boyfriend. Puddy remains a fan favorite because Patrick turned doing almost nothing into a full comic style. His blank confidence, strange loyalty, and perfectly dry delivery made Elaine's dating life funnier every time he appeared. Ian Abercrombie became Justin Pitt, Elaine's wealthy and demanding employer, at 54 years old, bringing old-world manners and absurd expectations into her already difficult work life. Mr. Pitt stood out because he treated tiny personal habits like serious business. From eating a Snickers with a knife and fork to needing Elaine for the most specific tasks, he turned elegance into something strangely exhausting. Outside the show, Ian Abercrombie had a long career in theater, film, television, and voice acting. He appeared in Army of Darkness, Desperate Housewives, and became known to animation fans as the voice of Palpatine in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Ian Abercrombie passed away on January 26, 2012, at the age of 77. Reports said he died from complications related to kidney failure, leaving behind decades of work across stage, screen, and animation. Justin Pitt remains memorable because Ian made eccentric wealth feel both refined and ridiculous. He gave Elaine one of her strangest bosses, proving that quiet demands could be just as funny as loud chaos. Lauren Bowles became the waitress connected to Monk's Cafe at 16 years old, appearing inside the everyday diner world where Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer turned simple conversations into comic arguments. Her role was small, but it belonged to one of the show's most important settings. Monk's Cafe was where bad dates, strange plans, and petty complaints became part of the rhythm, and even brief background faces helped make that world feel real. Away from that early appearance, Lauren Bowles built a steady acting career across television and film. She later became especially familiar to viewers through True Blood, where she played Holly Cleary, along with roles in comedy, drama, and guest appearances. Now 53, Lauren Bowles continues to be recognized more for her later television work than for her brief sitcom appearance. Her career shows how a tiny early role can sit quietly inside a much larger screen journey. For fans revisiting the series, her appearance is a fun reminder of how many future familiar faces pass through Jerry's world. Lauren Bowles turned a small credit into one early step in a career that kept growing. Steve Heitner became Kenny Bania, Jerry's overeager fellow comedian and unwanted social shadow, at 29 years old, adding a perfectly annoying kind of friendliness to the show. Bania stood out because he was never exactly cruel, just exhausting. His smile, his timing, and his desperate need to be liked made every exchange with Jerry feel uncomfortable in the funniest way, especially when soup or comedy etiquette was involved. Away from the role, Steve Hittner worked steadily across sitcoms, films, and guest appearances. He showed up in projects such as Friends, The X-Files, Roswell, and The King of Queens, often bringing sharp comic energy to supporting parts. Today, Steve Hittner is 67 and remains active through acting, stand-up, fan events, and comedy appearances. He has embraced the lasting affection for Barney while continuing to perform beyond the character's famous obsession with being funny. Kenny Barney remains memorable because he made irritation feel strangely cheerful. Steve Hittner created a character who could annoy Jerry by simply being too enthusiastic, turning "That's gold, Jerry" into a line fans still repeat. Danny Woodburn became Mickey Abbott, Kramer's fiery actor friend and occasional partner in chaos. At 24 years old, giving the show a burst of sharp temper and fast comic timing. Mickey stood out because he could match Kramer's strange energy without disappearing inside it. He was proud, reactive, ambitious, and easily offended, which made his scenes feel like two unpredictable performers bouncing off each other. Beyond the sitcom, Danny Woodburn built a long career in television, film, voice work, and advocacy. He appeared in Watchmen, Mirror Mirror, Bones, and many other projects, while also speaking out about disability representation in entertainment. Currently 62, Danny Woodburn remains active as an actor, comedian, and advocate. His later work has often combined performance with public conversations about how actors with dwarfism are represented on screen. Mickey Abbott remains a fan favorite because Danny gave him more than a recurring gag identity. He brought confidence, anger, timing, and pride, making Mickey one of Kramer's funniest and most memorable partners. Len Lesser became Uncle Leo, Jerry's overly friendly and guilt-inducing uncle, at 66 years old, giving the show one of its most recognizable family voices outside the Seinfeld household. Uncle Leo stood out because he turned every encounter into an obligation. A simple hello could become a complaint, a memory, or a reminder that Jerry was not being attentive enough. His cheerful neediness made him funny without ever feeling completely mean. Away from the role, Len Lesser had a long character actor career across film and television. He appeared in westerns, crime dramas, comedies, and guest roles for decades, including work in Kelly's Heroes, Everybody Loves Raymond, and many classic TV productions. Len Lesser passed away on February 16, 2011, at the age of 88 from cancer-related pneumonia. His death marked the loss of a familiar face whose career stretched far beyond one famous sitcom catchphrase. Uncle Leo remains beloved because Len made Family Guilt strangely hilarious. With one raised hand and the unforgettable, "Jerry, hello," he created a character fans could recognize instantly, the relative you avoid, but still somehow love. Julia Louis-Dreyfus became Elaine Bennis, Jerry's sharp, independent, and endlessly expressive ex-girlfriend, at 28 years old, bringing a new kind of female comic energy into the center of the group. Elaine was funny because she was just as selfish, petty, clever, and socially reckless as the men around her. Her dancing, sarcasm, bad dating choices, and explosive reactions made her feel modern, unpredictable, and completely essential. Beyond the sitcom, Julia built one of the most acclaimed careers in television comedy. She went on to star in The New Adventures of Old Christine and Veep, winning multiple Emmy Awards and becoming one of the most decorated performers in TV history. Now 65, Julia Louis-Dreyfus remains active in film, television, voice work, producing, and public appearances. She has also spoken openly about surviving breast cancer, adding real-life resilience to a career already defined by talent and longevity. Elaine Bennis still feels fresh because Julia never played her as the sensible woman in the room. She made Elaine messy, bold, selfish, hilarious, and human, a character who helped change what women in sitcom comedy could be. Their humor, timing, and unforgettable characters made Seinfeld a comedy classic that still lives on today. Thank you for watching. share which cast member surprised you most, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more classic TV stories.